Hi there, and welcome to the People's View for February 26th, 2010. My name is Bill Ohm, former state rep. I'll be your host today. With me is my friend and colleague, former alderman and former state rep, but current server on the various commissions for the state, Don LeBrun, Board of Medicine. So Don, we always have issues that come up with charter schools.
First, let me tell you, it's 2020, not 2010.
What happened to the last 8 years?
A decade's gone.
Next thing I know, there won't be daylight savings time anymore. That's coming up in a week and a half.
Yeah.
At least I remember that. It's spring forward, fall back, right?
That's correct.
Thank you, Don.
I don't even change my clocks. I just deduct an hour. I do. I've never changed my clocks.
I've got an atomic clock now, so it's supposed to do the ticks all the time, but you got to keep changing the batteries, so it's never quite maintenance-free.
Yeah, they still stop when the battery goes dead.
Me too. Well, this whole charter school reimbursement looks like it's going dead. Don, what's happening with this now?
Well, I happened to come across a letter to the editor from last Sunday's paper, written by the president of the union, and I couldn't believe it when I read it. This guy is a purveyor of deliberate misinformation. I mean, you got to be a nut to think that any of this is actually factual. He goes on to say that charter schools discriminate against students with special needs, with people needing a second language, things like that. That's so untrue. That's so untrue. I serve on the board of a charter school. I know what we do. And everything that he wrote here is just absolutely, it's sort of geared toward, look at me, I'm the president of the union, and look what I'm doing for you. It's to keep his minions in line. That's all it is. But it's all untrue. It's false.
So you're saying that what he does is for you, which is his union. That's the you you're talking about, not the you, the kids, or you, the parents.
Right. Right. I mean, charter schools have a lottery. They don't pick and choose who they want as students. They take the next person in line. They have to. They're mandated to do that. According to him, they pick and choose. But like I say, this is only to keep his union representatives feeling good about paying the exorbitant fees that they charge. Mm-hmm. When I was campaigning, last campaign in 2016, I didn't go by a ward map. I didn't go to just Republican homes. I went to every home in my ward. The amount of teachers that I spoke to that told me on the QT that they resented belonging to the union, but they belonged to the union in fear. That's not a reason to have to belong to something. And the fees, according to them, I don't know what the fees are, but according to them, the fees were exorbitant.
I think there's been a reform in place now that makes the union representation optional. That was a recent development in the government.
But don't pick up that option.
Oh. So if I went to the union hall and said,
you don't have to join the union, but boy, if you don't, the repercussions are going to be, And that's what they told me. And that was their fear of repercussions.
So what's the concern there? I mean, I would think that if you had a public school that's doing well with great teachers, great curriculum, engaged students, that people would want to send their kids to that school. And if there's an alternative school that would cost the parents more money, they would say, well, I'm not sure that's the case. But my read of the whole situation is that these alternative schools are the ones that are actually doing better with the kids.
They're the ones that are performing. And if he would look at that and realize that his schools are not performing up to par, and that's why students are leaving, then maybe he could straighten out his end.
Yeah, because I've always thought that really the best answer for all this is to give the parents a voucher. Go wherever you want to take your kid. Public school, private school, parochial school, homeschool. Your kid, your choice. And that way, if any one of these is underperforming, then the parents will gravitate toward the better performing schools.
That's absolutely right. And they should be able to do that. Right. And the public schools should not keep the money that they get per student. If a student leaves the public school, that money should go with that student, wherever they go. But this is what this is all about. This is why he's saying they're losing $87.5 million. They're not losing $87.5 million. They would be losing the money for that student going to another school. That child has to be educated like any other child. The money should follow that child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the state aid is about $3,600, and that kind of number done, and that would go with the student to the place of education.
Correct.
And the cost of a public school is quite a bit higher than that.
Like $14,000 to $16,000 from what I understand now.
So the loss of a student isn't really a big impact.
And they're not turning out educated students. And that's a fact. And all you have to do is look at the ratings of the schools throughout New Hampshire. Nashua South is something like 124th or something like that. I think Nashua North is a little better than that. They're somewhere in the 80s or something like that. The charter schools are within the top 15.
Yeah, we do have some excellent charter schools here in Nashua.
Well, the Academy of Science and Design is number one.
Yeah.
So why shouldn't a parent want to send their child to a school that is performing?
Yeah.
And why shouldn't the money follow that child? It's the child's money, it's not the school's money.
Yeah, and that brings up a broader question of us, who is really the caretaker of the child? Is it the parents or is it the state?
Well, I would hope it's the parents.
Right. Because if you've got a monopoly on education and the students must go to this school and the government gets to tell the teachers what the curriculum's going to be, and the parents don't have a choice of saying, well, that curriculum's a little bit off, it's kind of got this political correct stuff or this fluffy stuff. I'm trying to teach my kid the basics, reading and writing, arithmetic, or maybe learn a trade, or go back to fundamentals, and I don't like all this fluffy stuff. I'd rather go somewhere else. They won't be able to do that. I mean, that's what you have in totalitarian societies done, these curriculum that go from education to indoctrination. And we have to ask the question is, are we starting to move from education, slipping a little bit away into the indoctrination side?
Oh, we definitely are. Absolutely. But what this guy has to do is worry more about his teachers, giving them the ability to do what they are supposed to do, which is teach. All he does is hamstring them. It's all about union and union protection to him. Let those teachers teach. They're capable of teaching. Let them teach. We're turning out idiots because of people like him.
Yeah, and I would say I went to public schools for 12 years. I had great teachers, but this was back in the 50s and 60s, and no nonsense. If you were misbehaving,
I went a few decades before that, but
got your knuckles wrapped.
Oh yeah.
There's no nonsense.
I wasn't the greatest student.
Yeah, I mean, if you're disruptive in class, you're out of there.
That's right.
But at least you may not be the greatest student, but nobody was disruptive in class.
No, absolutely not. No, everybody was there to listen to the teacher and learn. But that's not what takes place now. Look at what happened in Florida yesterday. Little 6-year-old girl, because she got a little unruly, they called the police. The police come in and handcuff her and lead her out to a car and haul her off.
6 years old.
6 years old.
That's something was really, really broken in that system.
That's the second time in Florida in the past 2 or 3 weeks that I've seen.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we don't get anywhere near those kind of problems here in Nashua with, I think, our common sense people, our general traditions of personal freedom, individual liberty, common sense. I just hope we continue to make those values available to the kids, either through after-school activities or through their parents, if we can't do it directly through the curriculum.
Get politics the hell out of the schools. Let the teachers teach and let the students learn.
Well said, Don. Another topic that came up in the news of the State House is the issues about health care. And I see that our Nashua senator, one of them, has proposed mandatory coverage not only for pregnancy but for pregnancy termination. Abortion on demand, anytime, any place, anywhere. I don't think this is going anywhere in the House or the Senate. This was the senator that introduced the bill.
That was Senator Rosenwald.
And I hope that the Senate can see through the issues that are being driven by the National Organization of Planned Parenthood, who has truly a national agenda for this abortion on demand topic, that they're trying to push it to New Hampshire. And I hope that the common sense people of New Hampshire will tell their elected representatives that, no, we don't think that's appropriate, and no, we'd like to keep our health care costs down, and no, we don't think our health care should have mandatory coverage for something that I may personally abhor and certainly will never use, but I don't want to be assessed a fee for that procedure against my will.
Right. Why should I have to buy insurance that covers something that I will never need? I'll never need an abortion. At least I don't think so.
Well, not in this lifetime.
So why should I have to buy insurance that part of the premium is based on the fact that other people can get abortions?
Yeah, there's a lot of topic related to that besides abortions. There's other procedures which, I want to have, I'd rather not pay for. And can I get a lower cost insurance package that fits my needs and not these broad-based mandates that someone else is deciding for me?
Why should I have to pay a premium for someone who may decide to be transgender? That's never going to happen to me, so I don't need that insurance. So why should I have to pay part of my premium because blanket wide they want to cover people that may decide to be transgender?
Yeah, and that was kind of a sore topic that came up when I was still in the legislature the previous term, where the Secretary of HEW at the time was pushing a mandate for the state to cover transgender changes to underage individuals. Under 18, mandatory coverage by the state of New Hampshire under Medicaid under Medicaid regulations to cover these kind of procedures for an underage kid.
I was the reason in the legislature. I was the reason that Medicaid expansion got passed. That was me.
Was that the work requirement, Don?
That was me solely. No, yeah, work requirement. Yeah. If I had not gotten that bill passed, and at the time that it passed, the governor was listening in on the committee, and he sent me a thumbs up when I stood up and defended Medicaid expansion. And that was my bill alone. I couldn't get people to sponsor it with me because everybody had a different opinion of it.
It was a controversial.
52,233 people on that day were affected by that one vote. And that was my vote.
Yeah, I remember that topic was very controversial for many, many people. And I believe the kind of the compromise that helped get it through was the work requirement. So that if you were on public assistance, it wasn't going to be a entitlement for the rest of your life.
Right.
It'd be a hand up to get you going.
Yes.
And I think all of us.
There were certain
all of us
parameters
agree
you
with
had
that.
to meet. Yeah.
But I thought but putting those requirements into statute, that there are requirements, it's not a lifetime mandate, but it's a hand up, not a handout.
Right.
I think convinced a lot of people to go with that bill, Don,
Yeah.
and get it through the legislature.
And that was Democrats and Republicans alike.
But now what we're seeing is attempts to reverse that mandate of the work requirement and go back to the entitlement that once you're on it, well, you can stay on it.
Yeah.
Once you're on your
So
handout, you can
what's
keep your
happened?
handout.
What's happened over the last 4 years that changed? Everybody was for that at the time. And now over the past 4 years, they seem to have swung to the opposite side, and they want to change everything.
In my view, I think what's happened is the makeup of the legislature,
Well, obviously, yeah.
because the Republicans who tend to be more conservative on things like this, who are,
What's the logic behind that change?
well, you can think of some ulterior motives. If you want to, and I see this from my experience growing up in Chicago, where you get a lot of people dependent on government, and because they are dependent, the mandate is to vote for the people who are giving you this fix for your dependency.
But who's the government?
In our case, it would be the state legislature giving us money.
The government is all of us. We're the government.
Well, that's an excellent point, Don, because who are these people in government? They're people like you and I who served in
I mean,
the legislature.
they act, some of them act like there's a pot of money sitting somewhere, and all you have to do is dip in and grab it. And they don't think about where it comes from. They don't even think about the fact that they are part of that donation to that pot. You know, everybody else is, but I'm not.
Well, it's the problem of the commons, as they say. Once you have a common asset, then people want to grab more and more pieces of it and not maintain it, not take care of it, and then it deteriorates. So the pot of money that you've alluded to is the tax revenue, which they kind of just see as falling out of the sky.
Right.
And if we want more money, we just raise more taxes.
But they never realize that they have to take their wallet out of their own pocket and donate to that pot as well.
But they only did a little piece, and they're looking for a big chunk. So they take a little piece from them, which they're okay with, but they take a little piece from everybody else and everybody else who's not okay with it, and now their little piece becomes a big chunk, and they can spend it like it was found money that fell out of the sky.
But it's bad economics,
Absolutely.
because what they're doing is saying, well, let's just spend this money for everything we want and then figure out where we'll get the money from to pay for it. It doesn't work that way. Can you run your household budget that
not
way?
at all, not at all. But this is the way the Democrats would run the budgeting process when we first came in back in 2010. You know, they first spent the money, and then went to Ways and Means where I served, and said, well, we need another $800 million. And find it now because we're at deadline on getting the budget passed. So
Fine.
no public
Where do
hearings.
you suppose we get it from?
Well, it's the dilemma that people have once they have a lot of tax sources, like an income tax or like a sales tax, because when it comes to the crunch, they don't want to cut any programs that are overfed and not productive. They'll say, well, we got this little income tax done. It's only a little income tax. Why don't we just put another 0.25% on that? We could afford it.
Elizabeth Warren's 2% is just a little bit too to her, isn't it? She always holds her fingers up like that.
Right.
But then she talks billions and even trillions of dollars. So it's not a little bit.
Not at all. No, it's a ruse. It's if you're sympathetic to the problem of the day, but you don't think about the unintended consequences, those little generosities that you might have can become a big hole in your pocket over the next few years. We've seen that in Maine. We've seen that in Connecticut with the income taxes.
Yeah.
I have a second home in Connecticut, my home down south, I call it. High tax state. And they had no income tax. They were doing very well because the people from New York City who are really taxed high by the city, the state, I think the county as well, would tend to commute from Connecticut, Fairfield County, and work in the banking industry and do quite well.
Yeah.
And then Connecticut said, well, we got all these people making money and we got all these pensions that we got to pay for, so why don't we just kind of put in a income tax? It's only going to hit the 1% or the 5%.
We have a slight problem here with funding pension funds, don't we?
We do, Don. In
What
fact,
are we at, 32%?
well, we're 65%.
65?
And that's one of the topics that I wanted to cover with you. Thanks for reminding me, because we have the situation of a attempt to fatten up the benefits without funding the money going into the pension plan. So specifically, we're 65% funded right now. And that means that if everybody said, I'm retiring now, and let's just liquidate it and pay it, There's going to be 1/3 of the money missing, and even though you thought you're getting 100% of your pension, well, money's not there, and
By law, you only have to get 65%.
that might be the case. But there's a moral issue, which is if you're going to participate in the plan and you're promised a pension, the government who took your money to pay for the pension should deliver on your pension.
Has the government ever even considered upholding anything they tell you?
Well, I'm sure if they've said they're going to tax you more, they've upheld those promises.
I precede the inception of Social Security, and never from the day I was able to understand it did I ever support it.
Yeah,
It was a ruse from the start, and it will always be a ruse.
Yeah.
Every time money is needed, they know where to find it. Just go to Social Security,
yeah, it's
and there's nothing to stop it.
right. You and I were both born in the last century, and we're familiar with the Social
I
Security
think
that we
we're
paid
over
in.
20 years old.
I still think of people born in the last century, and they used to be old. Now they're not old anymore.
I was born closer to the century before that one.
So was I. But we won't have to go there, Don.
No.
We don't want to go back 2 centuries, at least for another few years. But the whole idea was that you had people paying into the system, and that the government would hold your money, invest it, and then pay you out from that gain at the time you would retire. So you paid a little bit more, but you paid constantly. Then at age 62 or 65, now 67, you would get your pension. But the problem was they kept increasing the benefits and not balancing that out with the stream of money to eventually fund those benefits. And that was very true in New Hampshire. We were funded 100% a while back, but then the benefits started to go a little crazy. And the reason for that is, well, we had a good market in the 80s. Things were going well for a while. So why don't we just, we're making money on our pension plan. We're 100% funded. Now we're a little more funded. And there's never going to be a need for a rainy day, is there? The stock market's going to go up forever.
Oh, yeah.
And so they were.
It's going up real well the last 3 days, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
right. Down about 6% the last 2-3 days. In fact, the return on our portfolio this past year was not very good.
No.
We're supposed to have 7.25% return on the average, and last year was below that. The average was around 5.9.
5.7, 5.9.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, well, we probably didn't have a really good portfolio because the year was pretty good, but that'll happen. But the problem is that if you're going to have a return of 7.25%, and you have like a little scatter diagram of good years and bad years, but that trend line's got to be 7.25. If you take away the good years, and all you have left are average and mediocre years, that trend line is no longer 7.5%. You got to overfund that in the good years, so in the bad years you can underfund it and keep that trend line. And that was the big dilemma, not the big dilemma, but the big mistake that everybody wanted to overlook, saying, well, stock market's doing well, let's pay more benefits. So we still have that problem. So this bill here to not cut benefits at age 65 is not a bill that's been funded. And they just want to spend another $148 million in the pension system without having funding, which will put that in further jeopardy.
Yeah.
So I hope we can get around this mindset to keep giving away the money we don't have and kind of run our own budget. One other topic I'd like to bring up, Don, in the couple minutes we have is this net metering topic.
Well, that's been contentious for a lot of years now.
Yeah. So what is this? It says, I've got solar panels and great, I want to power my house. That's terrific. Everybody should do that.
Yeah.
And then I want to sell my excess power back to the grid. Well, if the grid doesn't need the power, we have to pay the grid to take it anyway.
Well, why should the non-solar consumer have to pay a transmission cost on that solar power that solar power individual is selling back?
Excellent point, Don, because you got the power out of your house, but now you got to shoot that through the wires,
Got the transmission lines. And you and I would pay for it, not being solar, to benefit the solar individual and the power company.
So I think the answer is market pricing. You know, if the power company needs your power, they should be able to take it at the going rate. And if they don't need your power, say, well, it's great that you're generating lots of power. Why don't you go, you know, maybe turn up your hot water heater or find a way to store it. But, you know, we can't take it because we don't need it. But that's not how it works. It's this mandatory requirement that it must go back to the grid, even though they don't want it. So I hope the bill, which has increased the amount of power that's exempt from, or that's allowed from net metering from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts. I hope they don't go above 1 megawatt. 1 megawatt's about, you know, 425 homes, and that's plenty for a local small power plant. After that, you got industrial scale stuff, and that's just a subsidy for big windmills or solar plants that are not economical and require taxpayer subsidies.
Yeah.
But on the good news, Don, I came across a study. New Hampshire is the safest state to work.
You mentioned that to me, and I was really surprised at that. What makes New Hampshire more safe than anywhere else?
I'd like to think it's hard work and common sense, that we watch what we're doing, we
Do
take
we have
care.
better safety programs?
No, we don't. Not that I know of. But we are number one in the nation when it comes to safety, fatalities on both fatal and non-fatal accidents in the U.S. So I'm hoping that we
Could it be
pay
due to
attention.
the nature of the types of industry that we have here?
I don't think so, because we have construction, we have all
We
the,
have very little logging anymore, which is a
that's
very
true,
dangerous
that's
industry.
dangerous, yeah.
You know, I would think maybe it's evolved into a point where we have safer industry here than we used to have.
That could be. They say that California, for example, is the most, not the most dangerous. They have logging and other stuff. That title went to North Dakota, which I think is due to the oil drilling. If you're a roughneck in the oil field, that's got to be
Very dangerous.
a dangerous job. And we don't have any. There's no oil in New Hampshire.
And the ocean drilling and whatnot.
Yeah, we don't have that either.
Of course, I don't know what state you reflect on for that.
Well, I think we drilled down through all our topics, Don, so I'd like to thank you very much for the
Thank you,
discussion,
Bill.
as always.
Appreciate it. Very good.
And I'm Bill Ohm for the People's View. See you next time.